I had just thrown another log onto the fire, and my friend had gone quiet. We both noticed we were not alone. A hush fell over us as we looked around, wondering what it could be. We noticed a figure in the dark on our right side, and just then, my friend yelled out. We didn't realize it until later that we had even seen something move from behind us to our left too. But for now, we thought that maybe whatever it was might have been coming closer. The fire in front of us flickered a bright orange and yellow all across the trees, while the night sky above us threw down only stars and darkness. We sat there for what seemed like 3 hours, waiting for something to happen, when suddenly, my friend stood up and pointing into the air, shouting, "What is that?" pointing at a tall black shadow between the trees close by. I stood up slowly and tried to imagine what it could possibly be. What innocent and plausible explanation I could think of. This wasn't as terrifying as it seemed. But as the figure came closer, I knew there was nothing innocent about it. There was no logical and obvious reasons for it being there. Looking back, the best way I can describe it would be that it looked like one of those inflatable balloon people. Those giant, long, thin people that stretched out arms and legs. Only, while those seemed to be fun and inviting, this long, outstretched shadow person, or whatever it was, seemed to literally ooze with evil intent. I crab walked backwards, desperately wanting to get my feet and run, but my body refusing to do so as I asked. I'm not afraid to say I was completely petrified. My buddy was luckier, and once the thing had started moving, so had he, and I heard the roar of an engine and understood he made it to the truck, knowing that I might end up stranded here with this thing. That alone gave me the boost I needed to get my feet, but for a moment, I was still frozen to the spot, standing but unable to run. And that was when it moved faster than it should have been possible and was right in front of me within seconds. All I could think and feel was that I was going to die. I was so cold, and there was this awful stink. I could hardly breathe, and when I had made myself open my eyes, since I had practically screwed them shut tight with fear, I realized the dark mass was see-through, and I could make out the fire behind and through it. I don't know what would have happened then if my buddy hadn't have blasted the truck horn, but it snapped me out of whatever trance I was in, and I ran faster than I ever had before, going towards the beams from the headlamps of the truck. We got out of there and didn't even bother to return for our stuff. We had been hiking for days at this point, and after running from that thing, we were exhausted. We came into a small clearing, just sitting there for a while. We could have stared at the tall trees that surrounded us forever if we didn't hear something in the woods growling at us. It was long and low, and animal-like. We were still catching our breath when it started again, louder and closer this time. Whatever made that sound had been watching us for some time. Who knows how much longer it would stay unseen. I threw on my pack quickly, and my friend already having his on ready to go from taking a quick break. When he turned around to see me struggling with mine, he quickly offered to take most of it off me, which I gladly accepted without hesitation. I grabbed the knife out of my pocket and slowly stood at the ready, in case this thing would come back for us. We weren't amateurs or city boys looking for adventure, ending up well out at our death. We had been hiking, camping, hunting, you name it, for years. We were what you would call experienced. Therefore, we knew this wasn't a bear, or a cougar, or some sort of regular mountain animal. This thing was tracking us, using stealth and smarts like a human, except for the speed and agility that it seemed to be using to follow us and remain so far unseen. And that growl. Up until then, we heard only it moving through the trees and the quick, heavy breathing, or more like panting. Hearing that low, guttural growl now made my blood run cold. It was angry. That was the kind of noise my dog made when it felt threatened. God, I wished right then that we would have brought the dogs with us. Right at that moment, stood back to back, me with a knife, and my friend, a large stick he'd found lying on the ground. We were so completely exhausted, we barely had any energy left to put up a fight. The thing made a noise again. This time, however, rather than the low growl, it was more like a howl, telling us it was ready to make a move. And sure enough, the trees and long grass where it was hiding started shaking, and I made a split-second decision to throw the knife in that direction, like I was some sort of circus performer knife thrower. Whatever gods were on our side right then must have believed in us enough. I hit the mark, and we heard a high-pitched scream of what seemed to be pain. Before I had a chance to recover, we ran. We ran faster than ever before, somehow pushing through the exhaustion. I think pure fear giving us the adrenaline we needed for energy, and we made it back to base camp. One of our friends did not believe us, thought we were being dramatic and making stuff up. So we went back and followed the trail. We refused to join him. When he saw him again a few days later, he changed his mind. He'd found my knife on the ground and a large area of dried blood, and some pure white hair. Not fur, but hair. Safe to say, we haven't been back there since. I swear, I saw some sort of dark apparition in the woods. I'll tell you about it. I was walking home from a night out with some friends. My house is roughly a 25-minute walk through deep woods at the end of my street. I was at a point where I had about 10 minutes left. So I figured I would speed up a little bit and see if I can make it home in 15, since I enjoy going on long walks anyway. It was almost midnight, so there really wasn't anybody else outside but me and the occasional night dog walker. When I got about halfway through the woods, which is where this weird feeling began creeping over me, I ended up running most of the way back to my house. Once I made it to the last street before my own, suddenly everything felt eerie quiet, except for crickets chirping randomly here and there. Something was following me, and it was in the woodline. It was almost pitch black. There was very little light coming from the moon, and almost no street lamps, until you got closer to the houses. My cell was almost dead, and had gone into battery saving mode, so although I had the light app on, it was practically useless. You know that feeling you get sometimes, where you are sure you are being followed, and when you finally get the courage to spin around, there is just another random person heading back from the store or listening to music, completely oblivious to any anxiety they might have caused you. I had that feeling now, but tenfold. I couldn't think of any innocent reason to find someone trailing behind me, minding their own business at midnight in the dark. Every single Hollywood horror movie cliche seemed to apply. It suddenly got super cold. It was almost silent when there should have been all sorts of critters about. And the very second I finally willed myself to turn around, my phone died completely. If this had been Halloween Part 75 or however many there are, I would have been a goner for sure. No, I didn't see Michael Myers when I turned, but there was something there. It was hard to see, of course, since there was almost no light, but yet I could clearly make out a solid, dark mass. Something far bigger than a person, and also appeared to be floating. I stood there, rooted to this spot, for what seemed like an eternity. But judging by the time on my watch when I finally got home, must have only been a few seconds. I watched in absolute dread as this mass seemed to get bigger. Then something in my brain just yelled, "Run!" And I did. I can't tell you what it was, as I have no idea, but whatever I saw that night, it wasn't right. It should not have been there. It wasn't natural, and it sure as hell wasn't there to make friends with me. I know monsters exist. I saw one myself one day while out helping my father, who was felling a tree. I was watching from a distance, and in one moment of inattention, I saw something appear on the side of a tree opposite of me. It was not a human figure, but its shape suggested it might be humanoid. Anyway, as soon as I noticed this thing, it lunged towards my father. For clarification, this happened around 10 years ago. My dad has always been a big guy, really strong, and I was a skinny kid, around 12 or 13. Although I was used to helping out, my father had told me to take a step back, as he worked on a particular part of the tree. At this point, we were a bit further into the woods than we would usually have been, on account of there having been a storm and a lot of trees that had been damaged. Dad wanted this particular wood to work on, so we'd gone further in to make sure we found just what he was needing. Being in Pennsylvania, there are also a lot of caves and caverns out here in the woods, as well as huge expanses of trees. I know better than to mess around down there. No, that I ever thought of anything weird might happen, but I've also seen what a nasty snake or spider bite can do. I've heard rumors of there being huge drops in the caves, and no way of pulling yourself back out. That was the closest I'd ever been to them for years, and I wonder now, looking back, if the thing I saw maybe lived down there. What made it come out and go after my dad, I have no idea. Maybe that tree meant something. Maybe the sound awoke it. After, when father was recovered, although we never told no one else, and we never went back down that far, he said he thought maybe the tree was marking a grave or something. This thing was territorial. Anyway, I was just standing there when this thing screeched and appeared to slash at my father, using its arm and what looked like these long claws, so sharp they cut straight through his shirt, tearing his arm open. He was successful in managing to swing back at it with an axe in his other hand, and whatever this thing was, met with axe. It screeched much louder and ran off. Well, I say ran, but it sort of skittered about, like a giant spider that was pale and humanoid, and on two legs. It would be really hard for me to tell you exactly what it looked like. It was tall, but no more taller than my father. Really pale, almost like an albino. Completely hairless, having very long arms and legs. The head was almost featureless. Large black eyes. No nose or really much of a mouth that I could see. Just holes. We ran like hell back to the house, cleaned up my dad's arm. He didn't want to go to the doctor. I mean, what would we tell them happened? It took ages for those gashes to heal, and he had an awful fever for days following. So he just slept for hours. So yeah, I know for sure there are monsters out there. And if something like this exists, just what else is lurking about in the forests